What is your name and where are you from?
My name is Alex Hamburger, and I'm from the DC area,
Specifically where?
Silver Spring, Maryland.
And were you born and raised there?
Yep.
Uh, Talk about growing up in Silver Spring.
Yeah, I grew up in Silver Spring, but my dad is a musician, so I've always been the DC music scene has always been a part of who I am and what home means for me. And my mom was a dancer at Dance Place in Brookland. So yeah, for me, growing up had a lot to do with the kind of art that was being created around DC and the kind of community that that creates.
Talk about Danceland. What do you remember about that?
Yeah, so Dance Place.
Dance place, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Dance Place. What do I remember? I remember just having a lot of space to like run around and move, and also just seeing a lot of, like in the dance world, you're at a studio and there's like kids and there's adults and there's professionals. There's kind of everyone who wants to be there all together. But yeah, just like a really strong community of artists. Also, Brookland is so different. It was kind of dance place and then warehouses and nothing else. But that's like the change of what has been DC changing over the last blah, 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 blah amount of years.
20 years.
Yeah.
Talk about your dad. What kind of musician was he? What do you remember about kind of earliest memories of that being such a forceful presence in your life?
Yeah. So when I was born, my dad was playing a lot with a saxophone player and flute player named Al Williams, who's my godfather. And Al played with Mongo Santa Maria and Stanley Clark, and was a good friend of Chick Corea's and was kind of, but his music was a little more fusion meets smooth jazz, something in between. And they used to play at the Wharf down in Alexandria, like when a gig existed that you would play nights a week. So but the Wharf wasn't when I was born, but he was playing a lot with Al when I was growing up. People like Gary Granger and Scott Ambush, kind of this more fusion, funk, jazz, somewhere in between. But my dad's always really been a chameleon. He always played a lot in the blues scene, and a lot in the rock scene and in the studio. And so I never really, I think until I got older, I didn't really realize those things were separate. Like to me, it was just like, these are all these people that I know. And man, I got to see festivals and concerts and clubs. When I was like 13, I would go with him to blues jams all over. And once I started to play a little more, I got to sit in, but I was just around music all the time.
Or forget if I asked, what did your dad play?
Oh, my dad's a drummer.
What was it like, around the house? Was it mostly him playing? Was it a lot of listening to a lot of CDs and albums? Like, what was the home environment like with two creative parents?
Yeah, definitely listening to a lot of CDs, lots of music in the house, but also my dad being the drummer, and my dad used to own a studio back in the 80s in DC. So he had all the gear, he had all the setup, so our house was rehearsal house. So the thing I remember most is just like there was always people over the house playing music and rehearsing, and I would go sit on the basement stairs and like try to peek. And I even remember my mom trying to put me to sleep, and there's just like a full-blown 7-piece blues band in the basement. There was just a lot of people making music in my house, and that was, yeah, it was just like, it was so fun. And it made me know, like, I was like, yeah, I want to do that.
It's a missed opportunity for your dad and the band to play Rock Me Baby.
Yeah.
When it was time for you to go to bed.
Amazing.
I was gonna ask, how much was it a kind of osmosis process? Was there another alternative, or was
No,
music the thing?
I was like 5 years old, and I was like, I want to play the flute. And my parents were like, or I was younger, maybe like 3. I was like, I want to play the flute like Uncle Al. And they were like, all right, just hang out a little bit. They were like, here's a recorder and a book. I learned everything in the book. I said, no, this is not a flute. I want to play the flute. I think maybe I wasn't clear enough. And so, yeah, I guess I was 6 when I got my first flute. But even from then, like I knew I wanted to play jazz. I wanted to play improvised music, and I knew I wanted to go to New York. I was that young, and I knew that that was kind of the only thing that I wanted to do.
Can you talk about how that formation happened?
Mm, how I got to the point of knowing that was what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also specific, like in 3 parts, there are 3 specificities. I want to play jazz, I want to play the flute. I guess mostly those 2 of like, I want to play jazz and I want to play the flute.
Well, it was like, I want to play. Yeah, and I didn't think that those 2 things didn't go together until I started in school, because my dad was playing so much with Al, and Al played saxophone, but playing flute was as much a part of his artistry and his, being a person as an artist as the saxophone. And that was always something. So seeing him, I don't know, I was so young. I just think the sound of that instrument spoke to me. I just knew that that was what I wanted to do. And then I wanted to play the kind of music that I was hearing, right? Because it was the music that I started loving, and the music that really like would make me move as a kid. And you're like, what's that? What's that feeling of wanting to move? And once I kind of learned about like what they're doing sometimes is improvising, that just kind of blew my mind. And when I started in school and then through high school, I mean, I studied classical flute very seriously. And the environment, and I'm glad I did, because it gave me so much of what I have to use to play other kinds of music. But the environment of that, the hang, the community, the feeling of playing that music just didn't feel the same as getting to improvise and play jazz and go to these venues,
Well, I think few classical musicians would ever describe it as a hang.
Right, right. I mean, it is in its own beautiful way, but
Yeah.
it also just like, it wasn't familiar to me. That's not what I knew or wanted,
Nor I'm saying the in crowd wouldn't label it as.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what was we're talking about Brooklyn, we're talking about bouncing all over, but for you growing up in Silver Spring, like what was the environment like there? There's, plenty of music and stuff in Silver Spring, so I'm wondering what else, like the neighborhood, the city you grew up in had.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up off of New Hampshire Avenue, and, kind of what feels like a suburban part of Silver Spring. And, yeah, I mean, something I feel as an adult, which I guess I didn't feel then, but it was a huge benefit, is just being able to be so close to and part of a city culture, but also like I grew up with a yard and trees, and I could see that. And I think that's something really special about DC. Whether you're in DC or Maryland or Virginia, like you're kind of part of that. But then there was also the political part of growing up in DC. I mean, it's kind of, even though my parents couldn't be farther from working for the government, like it exists as a part of everything. And I just remember like so many kids I went to school with, their parents working for the government, and that was just like a normal thing. And then what that turned into for me is I was going to protests super young. I mean, I found a picture the other day. I must have been like 12 years old at some protest downtown during the Bush administration. I can't remember what it was, but we used to, ride the metro and go to protests. And when I was in high school, I kind of fell into this feminist club at my high school that I became the leader of, and started working with some like abortion advocacy groups. And I used to skip school to go to Planned Parenthood protests. And I guess I always thought like, you don't realize something isn't normal when it's your environment until you live and meet people outside of that. And you're like, oh, you didn't skip school to go to Planned Parenthood protests? And I was like, wow, that's a part of growing up in DC, right? Like all of this is happening here. I mean, we feel it now in the arts and the music scene, like we can't exist outside of that. So I guess that is also true for growing up here, you know?
It's the long Washington, this long shadow cast over DC.
Yeah, yeah. We are not Washington, but unfortunately Washington is here.
Where did you end up going to? Did you start flute really in middle school or studying classical flute in middle school?
Yeah, I mean, I started in elementary school and I had a private teacher. Yeah, and just I guess I got more and more serious as I went along. Um and I guess in high school I got a scholarship to be a part of the Levine School and was studying with a teacher there, and then also got to be a part of things there, but also because I was constantly knowing that I wanted to play jazz. I mean, I like fought my way into the middle school jazz band and insisted on being a part of it. And then my dad had heard through some of my dad had met and played a lot of more jazz back in the 80s. I think he was a little more around that scene than he is now, but he had heard about Paul Carr's Jazz Academy. And so that was the thing that really was a huge spark moment. I guess I was 13, about to start high school when I did Paul's camp for the first time. And yeah, I did that all the way through high school and studied with Paul Carr privately, and was just a huge part of my development during that time for sure.
Can you talk about? Can you talk more about studying with the Jazz Academy of Music and those summer camps and what that environment did for you as a burgeoning young jazz obsessed musician?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is Paul and the teachers, right? Like it was Paul Carr, Pepe Gonzalez. Actually, I think my first year, Alan Johnson was teaching there, but then also one year, I remember Alex Brown was teaching there. Um, Richard Seals was teaching drums. So they were all like real musicians who had done the thing and they knew what they were talking about. And Pepe Gonzalez taught this jazz history class that, like, to this day, those of us who are still friends and a lot of us who are still professional musicians just like talk about how incredible that was.
What made it incredible?
He would just tell it how it is. He'd be like, man, this one time I met Miles's band, and then he'd throw on a record and he'd be like, you hear that? He didn't kidify it or like educationify it. He was like, look at this music that I experienced that is part of this culture. And he would get into the historical context, and he wasn't afraid to really like show the music as it is. And later I went on to work for Paul, and I watched him even do that with like 5-year-old kids. He would talk about the music that way because it was so precious and important. But then at the same time, Paul is so good about, and I didn't understand this until I was working with Paul. Paul is so good about finding a way to get kids improvising from the beginning and understanding the music from the beginning. So it's really fun from the beginning and you feel a part of it. And then, I mean, I just got to be in that program with such serious musicians, so many serious musicians who are in New York and LA and all over the world came out of that program. So
Who are some of the musicians you can?
yeah, I mean, I was there with like Max Light and Aaron Sieber and Dan Papalardo and the Latona brothers, Andrew and Chris Latona, and now Eliza Salem, who's in my band, they were one of my students at the camp before, and Tyrone Allen, who's in my band, did the camp with us. And yeah, just a lot. There's like a crew of us. And even like the generation before us, like Elliot Seppa and Elijah Jamal Balbet here in DC, like, they came out of that. Yeah, and Braxton Cook, exactly. They all came out of the Paul Carr hang. And so there was already like starting to be that legacy. Like we got to see Elijah do it. And that was like, whoa, that's cool. He's like, he did this, and now he's doing it. And then to all kind of come up together. And a lot of us are still friends, and it's just crazy that we like have this deep community because of that.
With Tyrone and Eliza, what is it about that shared experience that still translates to the current working band?
That's a great question. So Tyrone, I think he just did the camp for one summer. So he wasn't in and it was like his last summer of high school. So it just became a point, I guess, like a meeting point, but then, and then Eliza is a little bit younger. So they were in the camp when I was a counselor. So they weren't people that I was like in the band with, but I think the shared experience is like we all kind of came up, even though we had other influences for sure, other teachers, home musical influences, we all had this thing that helped us understand like what is this thing that is jazz from such an early age. We got a taste of that in the same way, and that the music that we play with my band and the music that all three of us play is not always within such a narrow line of that tradition, but it's part of who we are, and it's part of the music that we make. And
What was that when you're talking about that taste of the music? What that kind of shared definition? What is that?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a hard one, but Paul and all of the people that teach at the Jazz Academy and a lot of the teachers in DC, I love because they're very intentional about teaching the tradition of this music in a really kind of like deep and methodical way. And I think that no matter what kind of improvised music you're going to play, if you want to understand this music, Black American music, improvised music, creative music, jazz, whatever you want to call it, you have to go back and like really understand it from the beginning. So yeah, I guess that's kind of getting that experience. And then also with this DC twinge to it, and then we all would go to the jam sessions at Columbia Station, and we all
Rest in peace.
yeah, and we would all, hang out at HR 57. And I mean, we used to have our concerts here at Westminster.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we would have like our end of the year, Jazz Academy concerts here. And that's so special and such a crazy environment on a Friday night. People would be so excited, and it was
Talk about the tradition.
yeah, talk about the tradition. Exactly. It was so real. It was all very real. Like Paul was about,
Real jazz.
Yeah, exactly.
What did you get from learning the tradition from Paul that say you wouldn't have gotten, that you didn't necessarily absorb from just seeing Uncle Al and Dad play multiple nights a week? Obviously, this is what made you fall in love with it, but what did Paul and the Jazz Academy, what did that method of historical teaching give to you in terms of that appreciation of the tradition of kind of intentionality?
I mean, Paul is such a great teacher because he breaks it down. He'll break it down to the bones. Like he's like, yeah, we're gonna listen to this and it's fun, and I'm gonna bring in the Van Doren artists to play for you, or Delfeo Marsalis or whatever. But then like we're gonna sit and we're gonna talk about scales, and we're gonna talk about swing feel, and we're gonna talk about how Paul has a really good way of teaching young people how to take that and like, how can you do it? How do you learn how to do it? How do you develop this language? And yeah, I think the methodicalness of that. And then how do these different, it's not just listening to the records. How do these different saxophone players sound? How do these different bands sound? And then in the Jazz Academy, getting to play in a big band with a bunch of other teenagers that are equally as serious about this, and watching him work with the big band and being in that, and then getting performance experience. I mean, we played here, but we went to Cleveland and played the Tri-C Jazz Festival. We played the Gen Conference in Atlanta. I mean, I got to sing this really hard arrangement of "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning" with Javon Jackson in Cleveland. Like, that's like a crazy thing to get to do when you're 16. And if Paul's going to put you in the position to do things like that, it's because he knows he's going to push you to be good enough to do that. Like, he would is such a loving person, but like wouldn't play. Like, this music is serious. So if you want to play it at this level, you have to be serious about it and put in the time. Yeah.
Really have your sink or swim moment.
Yeah.
Okay, you're gonna sing with your mom. Don't fuck it up.
Yeah, but it wasn't just don't fuck it up. It's like, here are things and ways. Here's the ways to not fuck it up. And like I think that was really beautiful.
What did studying classical flute in school also, middle school, high school, what did that do for you while you're really getting deep into the jazz? What did the deep study of flute do? You talked about it giving you this white toolbox you have now. So talk about those building blocks.
Yeah, I mean, just the technique of having to, I used to do these classical competitions and I would get so nervous playing like a Mozart concerto from memory in front of a panel of judges. So that's when I was like, I cannot do this. This is not for me. But you have to learn how to learn, I think, is what it taught me. One side is that it taught me how to learn things that are hard and that are different. And the other side, and are precise. And the other side is it just taught me how to play the instrument at a level that, like, yeah, you just really have to, whether it's sound or technique, it's just, there's nothing like learning that classical book, that really teaches you that. And when I was younger, I'd say from elementary school when I started up until kind of mid high school, I studied with this incredible teacher named Carrie Rose, still in Tacoma Park, giving lessons, amazing flutist, also an incredible composer. And she is really in the more avant-garde new music scene. So she would play on our recitals, she would play these crazy pieces where she was singing and talking and using extended techniques and dancing. And she would encouraged us, I think, like from the beginning, if you wanted to, you could write music. So, I mean, I wrote like a graphic score when I was like a kid, because that was an activity that we did. And she really encouraged us to think outside of the box, work on that technique, learn the repertoire, whatever, but also like super think outside of the box of what you can create sonically. Like, what sounds can you make on this instrument? And then what things can you write that are, that whatever is in your brain, how to get it out. And so I think that was really important for me. And then later in high school, I studied with this incredible teacher, Karen Johnson, who's still at the Levine School and has had a lot of students go to Juilliard, and all sorts of orchestras and whatnot. And it was really hard at first because for going to school for classical flute at that level, I came to Karen behind. And so there was a moment where we were like, I have to learn all these orchestral excerpts and what is this? And then I made the decision. I was like, wait, I'm not going to audition for classical schools. And then it just became amazing because we really could dive into a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more contemporary classical pieces. And then also, how does the technique and how does being able to do anything on your instrument make it so that when you're improvising, whatever's in your brain can come out, no impedance,
There's not that pressure of we're looking to get from point A to point B. It's we're starting at point A. We'll see where we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, your teacher in Tacoma Park was
Carrie Rose.
And when you said you play with ensembles with her? Is that through school, through like an after school program, or?
I mean, we would just have like a recital as with her of her studio. So like
Oh, okay.
everybody would like
So she had
play.
a,
Yeah, and there'd be a pianist and everyone would play. But then through the Levine School, I was also part of the honors program there. And that was cool because, like, for one thing, they paired me with a classical guitar player and we learned a bunch of Piazzolla and got to play at Millennium Stage. And, like, that was a crazy experience. Also, they have a recording studio there. So I had this, I also had a jazz quintet in my last year of high school with some friends, and we got to record there, which was a very cool thing to get to do at that age.
was it the classical teachers that gave you more of the permission isn't exactly the right word, but more of the permission in some ways to start writing, or did you feel that from both the jazz and classical wings of your education?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think when I really started to get serious about writing music was actually in college when I was studying with Ingrid Jensen. Ingrid was the one who really, I think, solidified that for me. Other than like writing when I was a kid with, kind of more for fun. I don't think it wasn't necessarily about like, yeah, it was just like what there was time for. Like so much of what I did with Paul, I did study privately a bit, but that it was like very focused. And a lot of what I did with Paul was ensemble things, whether it's in the camp or the jazz academy. And it was just like learning how to play jazz and learning that language. And then later with at the Levine School with Karen, I think was more focused on like, okay, what tools to really like play the shit out of the flute can I take away from this? Yeah, I don't think there was never a time it was like, don't do that. It was just when they got more introduced.
What were some of those things that kind of play the shit out of the flute that
Oh
you
man,
developed?
just like hard, just technique, etudes, long tones, how to get a good sound, how to make your fingers work the way that you want, kind of things. Yeah. Playing with a metronome. But my dad was the metronome. Ever since I was a kid, he would come in while I was practicing and be like, "Goodbye."
Oh, not sorry, but Metro he's on the drums and he's going dead. He's like,
No, no, no. He's like, "Here's the metronome. Use this."
is a
So,
very drummer thing for him
yeah,
to do.
it is correct.
Did I feel like it's a stereotype? And most kids say, "I'm going to be a musician." Their parents are like, "Okay," but what was what were those conversations like growing up? The going from I want a flute to I want to be a musician.
I mean, super supportive, very supportive always. But also, my parents were like, "This is hard. You see that this is hard, right?" I mean, to this day, I mean, I would say my dad is one of the hardest working people I know. He and this is hard. Playing, doing art, in any which way and trying to make a living and be a stable professional person is it's hard. And so I think that was the only thing. It was just like so much support and so much opportunity. I mean, once I really started, and later in high school, once I started like really being able to play enough to gig and have my own band and play with Paul and, do other gigs on my own, I would go with my dad a lot. And he was always like, hey, can she sit in? And I, was super supportive.
Do you remember the first time you sat in?
I don't. I used to sit in here a lot Monday nights for the blues night. My dad was in Jock Johnson, the saxophone player, and Little Margie Clark. My dad was in kind of, I guess both of.
Fantastic blues names.
Oh yeah, they were both. I guess kind of both of their last bands before both of them passed. My dad was the drummer, and they would play here, and I would get to come and sit in, and that was really special. I mean, Little Margie was one of James Brown's backup singers. So, and she didn't drive. So any gig that we went to with Little Margie, she would ride with us, and she would just have us like laughing the whole time. And Jock Johnson actually is Michelle Indigiocello's dad. Fun fact. Um, because DC's like that,
DC
you know,
man.
DC is like everything is connected all the time. And the bass player in that band was Jock Johnson's other son, Jock Jr. So
JJ.
yeah, exactly. So it was always all connected. I mean, that's, Clarence, who we walked in. I've known Clarence since I was a kid. I've known the Pastor Brian and Dick. I've known them all since I was a kid. So it's just like, it's cool to get to be an adult now and still get to see and be a part of that.
What when you're sitting in here with Jock and his bands, what were you singing? Were you playing flute? Were you
Playing? It would usually be like, that was a big thing, right? Because I was learning like jazz and jazz language. Then I would go to these blues jams, or I would come sit in on a blues here. My dad would be like, yeah, so it's a little different. You get it? Like the vibe's a little different. And learning that actually was a really good lesson for me in learning that every situation needs a different thing. So you have to be able to do all the things in different ways,
What was it like being steeped in jazz language and making that? How did you feel about that transition into blues language? Like what were you learning in those moments about how to play in this space and context that you hadn't before?
Well, I think when you're first learning a lot of like jazz language and harmony, there's a lot. It's just a lot all at once. You're starting to learn bebop, you're learning about Charlie Parker, you're learning these solos. There's just like a lot of content and a lot of harmonic movement and a lot of theory. And so I think, and before you get comfortable with that, it takes a lot of thinking about, okay, what scale goes over this, and how does this go, and how do all the things fit together with where, like when you go to play a blues, it's just like, you gotta feel it in your gut, and you gotta hear it, and there's kind of only one scale that you're thinking about, and you just have to hear the language a little more and feel it and play less, Like, I mean, that's not just for blues. I feel like my life lesson is, as I get older, I'm just like, oh, you just have to play less.
Take the damn on.
Exactly. So I think it was a cool lesson in that. And also like, not as much with Jock here, but when I would go to these blues jams that my dad would play.
Where was he playing them?
There was one in Annapolis at this place called The Whiskey. I don't know why I have a strong memory of going there, but he does the one at JV's now. And there's one, I don't know. There's a couple that have
one at Zubar.
I think he's done that one over the years. There's some different ones, but these guitar players all like to play an E, and I have being in the beginning of my, coming out of school band, and then, the beginning of learning jazz, I was like, E, a blues in E, that's terrible. But it was good training, definitely good training, but a learning curve for sure.
And learning to be part of the group.
Yeah. And also just seeing how different communities act different, like the hangs are different at different places.
Elaborate on it.
I don't know. I'm just thinking about like the blues jam in Annapolis was super different than the hang here, and it's just like different, but it's always beautiful to see how no matter what the style is or yeah, whatever the group of people is, just to see how everybody really comes together and takes care of each other. At least like most of these kind of music communities in DC that I've gotten to see, like everybody is really there like for each other and for the music. Yeah.
I mentioned Al Williams. Who else would your dad play with locally in the jazz world?
Yeah, I mean, he used to play with Marshall Keys sometimes back in the day. That was a little bit after I was born. Um, Gary Granger was somebody that my dad played with a lot when he was super young, and my dad just talks about like that was like school for him, getting to play a lot with Gary Granger, just, while Gary's, oh, see you guys next week. I'm gonna be on tour with Schofield, I'm gonna be out with Dennis Chambers and so yeah, and it's funny, yeah, like I knew Gary Granger's daughters growing up and because we used to like play and run around and yeah, you just like when you're a kid, you don't realize how I mean, I knew it was special, but like now looking back, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. That's Gary Granger. Have you seen those? Like
We're
that's
like,
crazy.
hey, that's Michelle Indesello's father.
Yeah, or like, like Lil Margie would tell stories about working with James Brown. I mean, I knew when I was like, this is crazy. I'm gonna remember this forever. But yeah.
Can you share not details, but like
Uh
roughly?
well, it's like nothing different than you would expect. I'm trying to remember a specific story, but just that, yeah, just he would yell at the band and he was an intense personality. Let's just say that.
Yep.
All the stories seem to be true. They all seem to match up. So
I'm curious, growing up, what obviously we alluded it at the beginning, DC has changed a lot. What that was like, whether you saw that in both how your parents were working, where they were working, and also just if you had a sense say, before you went off to college, like how the city's music landscape was changing.
I think that before I went to college, I was too young and therefore like absorbed in my own thing. Though I do remember I remember a big thing I do remember when I was a kid was I remember when you couldn't smoke cigarettes anymore in bars and clubs. That was a big moment in our house because, you know, my dad was in bars and clubs all the time. But as far as the scene, I mean, because when I went off to college, like Twins was such an important place for me in high school. It was like where I had my first
We'll talk about
gigs.
that.
Yeah, it was. So, I mean, I would go to Twins and it was amazing because you could see, like, I remember seeing like Marquise Hill and Caroline Davis or like Warren Wolf's bands, these crazy bands from New York. But then you would also go and be like, Wendy, can you put me on the calendar? Can I get a gig? And so I had my first gigs there, and I actually played some of my first gigs with my dad there, which was fun. Um, yeah, and it was like a real nurturing space and a space where the music would exist. And then Bohemian Caverns was amazing because you could just go see. I mean,
The best.
I remember seeing like sitting this close to Gary Bartz playing and being like, it was like a spiritual experience. And then there was all of the jam sessions like Eula and trying to remember all the places, the
Utopia.
Brixton, not Utopia. I was right after Utopia, but there was all these jam sessions that would happen all down U Street, and so we would just bounce around.
Cafe Nemo.
Yeah, and you'd just be like, hey, like you'd run into each other going up and down the street. I don't think that until I moved back here as an adult, or until COVID really like killed off the last of that, except JoJo's. JoJo's is still holding on. Things were changing. I mean, I remember when the caverns closed. That felt terrible because in my brain, I was like, one day I'm gonna bring my band and play at the caverns. It was so smelly but so magical. And yeah, and we would come home from college in the summers and we would go every Monday. sit in or play and
And
hang
talk
out.
about Monday being the
The
Caverns Orchestra.
Yeah, exactly. The Bohemian Caverns big band.
And since there were a bunch of local musicians playing everything from Ellington and Basie to Maria Schneider, like what was it like? Was it important to see that kind of environment?
Yeah, for sure. I'm laughing because I remember. Oh,
I was thinking, I want to add some light on her face potentially because the light's changing.
Yeah.
Um,
We want to pause.
yeah, let's pause for a second. So pausing now. So are you ready? Okay. Go for it.
Help
okay. So we're talking about the Bohemian Caverns Jazz Orchestra. You said playing like big band music and then Maria Schneider, and I was laughing because so I would go sit in some. I also play baritone saxophone. I started doing that in college, and Lee Pilser, who's somebody I've known forever because my dad played with her and her husband. She would let me sit in. She would encourage me to sit in, and I guess I can't remember if it was when I was sitting in or if it was because then I would sub for her sometimes. Anyway, I just remember one day in the second set, Brad calling some number and it was like Darcy James argue music and like the heart craziest thing ever. We had just played like a Count Basie chart. And I was like, what? You can do that? Like, what an incredible thing to have a big band that can span that kind of yeah, different kinds of music.
And it's up from 1940 to 2010.
Exactly. So that was definitely cool. Like, oh, you can do it all. And the audience will come along for the ride, if you do it in a presented in the right way, which I think they were really good about.
Did you end up going to a college for music or more of a liberal arts education that involved music?
Yeah, ended up going to straight up music conservatory, SUNY Purchase in New York. And yeah, it was amazing. It was great. I really got to dig deeper into what learning about this music and how to play this music was. And at the same time, like be learning and then be going to Smalls every night, start playing gigs in New York. And, like a lot of the teachers at Purchase were, same at Juilliard or MSM or whatever, and had these long legacies of being a part of this music and getting to be in New York and learn from those people was just, yeah, an invaluable experience.
Who were some of your teachers?
Yeah, I got to study with Gary Smullian and John Faddis, and I got to study with Ingrid Jensen my senior year, which was really life-changing. Doug Weiss ended up being a mentor of mine, and Kenny Washington taught the history class, which was like a game changer. John Riley taught this like crazy rhythmic class that we all, would blow our minds. It was special.
And so there's this reputation of the New York scene being cutthroat and blah, 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 but very different from the DC scene. Did you feel any meaningful difference as a DC musician being in New York for those 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, everything just feels different, smells different. The ride cymbal feels different. Everybody's quarter note feels different. It's just like the environment changes the music so much. But at the same time, I was also in school, so it was like the school experience was one thing, and then getting to hang out in the city was another. I also just got to see so many great, incredible, I got to see Roy a bunch. I got to see Roy Hargrove. I got to see Roy Haynes. I got to see all sorts of like crazy bands around New York. And then also to be with young people who were playing, at this cutthroat level. I mean, Samara Joy was a freshman when I was a senior, you know, and the drummer in Jaden, I can't remember his last name, but the drummer in Herbie Hancock's band right now was like a freshman when I was a senior, and just like getting to all grow up together on this next level of learning this music, and then together going out into New York and being part of it, and being like a New York school and a New York State school. There was a lot of kids that grew up in New York, so getting to learn about like a lot of kids that had gone to LaGuardia or grew up within the jazz scene there and grew up, you know, it was definitely different in its own way from DC.
Was there also a difference being in the jazz academy, being at the Levine School is one thing, being at music school for jazz in New York is, I assume, a different animal? And how did that differ? How was the immersion different?
Yeah, I mean, we just lived and breathed it, you know. I think I took 3 non-jazz, 4 maybe max, non-jazz classes in 4 years. And the music conservatory was cool too, because the classical conservatory was really serious. There was a really serious production conservatory. And we were all in this building together, and it was cutthroat, and it was because everybody was just like working and so much, but it was a good environment to, although there are some toxic things I think about jazz school competition environment, and I had to work through a lot of those. It was really important to have the drive to all be doing this thing together, and then we all got to play together. I mean, and luckily we were outside of the city, so we had a music building that was open 24 hours, and we could like play sessions at 2 a.m. And yeah, it was a big, I think that moment is a big growth period for anyone, but it definitely was a big growth period for me.
When did you start college?
In 2013. Yes.
I first saw you at Union Arts, that last Union Arts show in August 2016. So that would have been going into your senior year.
I think so. Yeah.
Talk about how your relationship with DC and building a musical identity kind of here, but also just as an artist, was progressing throughout those college years.
Yeah. So when I started the program, there was me and one other woman, and we were both freshmen. And other than that, there were no women in the entire undergrad jazz program, and there was no, part of that is there was no, not an excuse, but a part of that is there was no vocal program yet. So I latched on to that other woman, and her name is Nicole Davis. She's an incredible trumpet player, now songwriter, guitar player in New York. And I guess it was our sophomore year. Yeah, I guess it was our sophomore year. Some of our teachers had, or maybe our junior year, but anyways, they had encouraged us, like, why don't you put together like a regular thing, or like put together a jam session. So for I guess 2.5 years, we had a band, the HD Quintet, and we ran a weekly jam session by the school. And before we graduated, we put out an EP and a full-length album. Like, we pressed CDs, and we would book tours. Looking back now, I'm like, how did we know how to do this at like 19? But so I brought the band and we played Twins. I think we did that at least twice. And it was, coming home for the summers was one thing, but then getting to bring this thing that I was working on, and then that was the beginning of like my original music to DC, was so special. And I think it all just started, you know, blending together and being a part. But moving out of the DC scene made me realize how important the DC scene was to who I was as an artist.
Can you talk about things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the music that we grow up around. And like, I didn't realize other people didn't know what go-go was, you know? I just like got to college and I was like, well, you know, like go-go. And they were like, what? You know, and the way that people play jazz, and the the history of jazz here in DC, and all, I think it influences you in ways that are subconscious as well as just like being obvious. And the community, the aspect of community, I think I wouldn't have realized this in the moment, but just I always knew that like it was important to me to bring everybody together around this music. And that's why I somehow always ended up being the one organizing the jam session or the hang or the like, let's do a house show or let's do this weekly jam session. And I guess DC taught me that, because
When you say the way
Yeah.
people play jazz here, what is that? What is that distinctive?
I don't know if it's like a describable thing, but sometimes when I hear people from DC, I just like feel it versus, and it's not such a hard cut line, but like when you're in this room on a Friday night with a bunch of people that are from the scene playing, like you feel how that's different,
It's about how the music is made and with what people and stuff like this.
Yeah. And I think, there's a lot of soul and feeling in DC in the music that comes out of here.
I'm curious also, so DC is there we go. DC is known for being much more of a traditional straight ahead, 1950s hard bop-esque, I say, for the record. For people listening back to this in the DC Public Library going, what, straight ahead? It's kind of classic 1950s suits and what you could recognizably call Ken Burns jazz. Not to be disparaging.
Yeah.
What you're in college, you're in New York, there's a lot of cutting edge going on. What's it like coming from that strong background of this very traditional sense of what jazz is? Not that you didn't explore on your own, but that very traditional schooling into New York cutthroat cutting edge environment.
Yeah, well, part of the thing is that like Purchase was a pretty straight ahead school. The faculty there was kind of in line with that, which I am grateful for, the same way that I'm grateful for like the straight ahead traditional approach that Paul has to teaching the music. I think it's a really important way to teach the music. And yeah, I got to see some crazy, going to Brooklyn and seeing some crazy things, and getting to go to Winter Jazz Fest and see Mark Turner for the first time. I was like, what was that? Or seeing, Tom Harrell at the Vanguard, because somebody was like, you should come with us. We're going to drive down. You should see this, And then studying with Ingrid Jensen just like blew the doors to my world.
I'm so sorry.
Good. Just like her way of thinking about the music is so expansive, and then the music, just the way she plays the music, but the music she plays, and then getting to go see her. I mean, I got to go see her play with Darcy James RQ.
Full circle moment.
Yeah, and that was crazy, But then also, like, because there was a big production scene at Purchase, and because there was a big there's also like a studio composition major, which was kind of songwriting, whatever that meant to you. And it was so tied to a lot of kids that grew up in Brooklyn. Like there was a lot of, there was this group that was these three incredible rappers and a bunch of kids from the jazz department, and they would like do improvised sets, and it was awesome. Like there was this kind of what's new feeling, and like what's new and innovative happening at school, and then also getting to, then that group had a residency at this place called Lucy Rouge in Brooklyn. And so we would drive and we would go see Poetic Thrust play, or we would, go to Baby's All Right and see something different. And I just think what's cool about New York is there's so many different people doing different things, and getting to go to the Stone. I mean, when I started going to the Stone, I was like,
Was that the Old Stone or
the Old Stone, yeah. It was like, whoa.
abandoned Chinese restaurant
Yeah.
in Lower East Side of the Stone?
I mean, seeing like Jen Shu's solo set at the Stone, you're just like, that's mind blowing, you know? And yeah, I think not that that wasn't happening in DC, but in New York, you get like 10 different flavors of that.
It's
And
not the same.
yeah, and like, you know, shout out Luke and Geo, like they were that young and exciting. CapitalBop was and continues to be, was that young, innovative thing, like the things that Luke was really curating and was around. Those were what for DC, you know, what was happening here.
What you graduated, what did you want to do next?
I just wanted to play the music and make enough money to eat. And that was hard. But
How did that start to take shape?
well, immediately when I graduated, I moved to New Orleans and I lived there for the summer.
Because you wanted to go real back in the
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so my best friend from high school here is from New Orleans, and so we kind of were like, let's do it. We're young, let's do it, and it was awesome. I lived with some musician friends that I knew from Purchase. I bought a old bike. I put my flute on my back. I ended up playing like a lot of gigs. I had a weekly gig. You know, I met a bunch of musicians. Yeah, and then I went to the Banff Creative Music and Jazz Workshop
in Banff, Canada.
in Banff, Canada. Two different sides of the coin. I went from New Orleans to studying with Vijay Iyer and Tyshawn Sori.
You went from 1914 to
the future.
2017 in a real distinct way.
Exactly. And so and then I moved to New York, which all of that was like a crazy order.
Let's talk about Banff. So you mentioned Vijay and Tyshawn Sori, but how long were you there? How long was the program? And then what were you doing? Who else were you learning from? And also just what are you learning from Vijay and Tyshawn?
Yeah. I mean, Banff introduced me because Purchase was a little bit more of a straight ahead traditional school. Like Banff, like I didn't really know much about Anthony Braxton. Like I kind of did, but then like, oh boy, you know, doing conduction, getting to do conduction with a large group of people with
Explain
Tyshawn.
conduction.
Conduction is, how do you explain it? It's like the improvised conducting of a group of musicians who are improvising. So getting to like do conduction with Tyshawn, but then also again getting to be in a cohort of people that one day we were like, we're gonna do our own conduction thing. So I got to like try it, and it was really hard. And then just getting to learn a lot from the people I was there with. I was there for 3 weeks, but then also
Talk about an intensive.
it was really an intensive experience. I got to, you know, Gretchen Parlato and Linda O and blanking. Jeremy Pelt was there. Yeah, it was Jen Shu was there. Ok Young Lee, just like really a cast of artists. And yeah, I got to experience people talking about like improvised music and creative music in different ways and the history of it in a way that I just wasn't as familiar. I mean, I grew up in this scene here in DC, and then I went to a straight ahead school, so that was like a little far.
And had your touches on new music and
Yeah, like I had
avant-garde.
I had touches and I loved it, what I was seeing, but I didn't really have that full like historical background that says some of the people there. And I was also like, I'm like, man, I'd love to go do Banff now. I was so
I mean, you're also not
young.
there in DC with Harvard professor MacArthur genius Vijay Iyer.
Yeah, exactly.
Brain works so much on a different level than most of us.
Yeah, I was in VJ's ensemble my first week. Wow. It was both incredible and like just really kicked my ass. The way that he is so particular about like texture and the way that you're improvising and the way that you're getting from point A to point B. This is pretty mind blowing.
You should go back and read the interview I did with him and Craig Tabor, because he talked about
I
Roscoe
love that
Mitchell.
record.
He talked about Roscoe Mitchell kicking his ass in the same way when he went on tour with him.
I believe that. I'll have to go check that out.
And so is that kind of like, to simplify it, to ask a very simple follow-up, in the same way you had these flute, classical and more avant-garde flute teachers in DC saying, think big about your instrument, not just, Mozart or Yusuf Lateef, but really what can you do with it? Is that, in Banff, are you like, with your instrument, with the notes on the page, let's throw the notes on the page out, just like with this idea of music, here's everything you can do.
Totally. Yeah, it definitely opened up my world. Yeah, I guess is that where I first started messing with pedals? Did someone let me borrow a pedal there? It might have been where someone first let me borrow a pedal. Yeah, it definitely changed how I thought about improvising and like the possibilities that were out there, and both like throw the notes on the page away and some of the like hardest music I've ever seen in my life, where I was like, you what? Yeah, and thinking a lot about like what does it actually mean to be an artist, and to what is the story that you're telling? I think a lot about Jen Shu, working with Jen Shu during that time. She really encouraged us to think about what stories we're telling and how. To this day, like I think about
What is the intention with what you're creating?
Yeah, exactly. And how are you communicating this someone else's existence to other people, Oh, yeah.
So you moved to New York in what, summer of, or it started, that'd be like fall of 2017?
Yeah, like September 2017.
And what are you doing while you're there?
Oh my gosh.
How long are you in New York, and what's the carving out the artist's life like?
It was really hard. I lived in a bedroom in Washington Heights the size of a closet. To make ends meet, I was teaching English online in China. So I would wake up at like 4 a.m. I was so broke. I was busking on the subways with friends, and then, playing gigs here and there. I was playing a lot of Barry in college and through Banff and everything. And Jason Marshall definitely during college became a big in New York. Jason Marshall, also DC native, and also Paul Carr student, became a big mentor of mine. And he would, he would sub me a lot of Barry gigs, or like, man, I used to take the Barry on the subway to the Musicians Union, which is like almost at Times Square in the middle of the day, to sub like big band rehearsals for him, which was an incredible experience. But it was like, life was hard. It was hard. And I got to keep seeing some of the most innovative and incredible music, and be in a peer group of doing the same. But it was really hard. And then
Doesn't sound like you're doing what you were necessarily in DC or in college, like leading your own group, or
it was a real transition transitionary year. Nicole and I still had our band from college a little bit, but yeah, we kind of all were in this figuring it out phase. And then I auditioned for this program in Switzerland. And in fall, September 2018, September 2018, I moved to Switzerland for this year-long artist in residency program called the Focus Year. That was an incredible opportunity. And yeah, they basically auditioned a band from around the world, and there was, I guess, 8 of us in this band. And we would work with special guests would come in, and we would basically learn their book of music in a week, and then we do a concert on the final day. And they also paid for us to make a record together, and we did some touring with that group. And I mean, just like living in Switzerland was a crazy experience.
You're in the first Trump administration.
Yeah, it definitely, yeah, exactly.
Had you been working on, especially after Banff and Jen Shu, had you been working on what you wanted? Were you writing intentionally? Were you writing music? Were you trying to shape your own music, or was was there anything you wrote then that lasts to today, or was it a lot of still, as you said, kind of transitionary period?
Yeah, I was definitely writing music, but it didn't, I think the thing is, like, I started writing music that didn't fit my band from college. And so then we would play like the old music that we wrote, but then I was writing this new music. And because of Banff, I had met a lot of like new school kids. So I would play sessions at the new school and play like little gigs here and there, and we'd get to play each other's, music that was a little bit more adventurous. And so that kind of like led me into Switzerland. It was like I was already kind of dipping my toes in this water of writing.
So how's your music from evolving from college to then?
Yeah, I mean, I think Banff was a big catalyst. Banff, and then the people that I met and the communities. I mean, because of Banff, I got to play at the Old Stone before it closed, with Oak Young Lee. Like, that was crazy. And just getting to meet some of these people and kind of then they'd be like, "Oh, do you want to come see this show at like Barbez or something?" And it's like, Michael Atias, someone I hadn't heard of. It opened my doors in New York. And so that kept evolving. But then I also kept being able to go, and then I would keep going to Smalls, seeing my, peers there and playing restaurant gigs, playing standards all over, so it was a little bit of everything. I think I just was tasting it all and figuring out like, what is me.
Did you meet your husband in that mix?
I met him in Switzerland. Yeah. So I met, Zay was doing his master's at the school, this jazz campus in Switzerland. And I mean, that time in Switzerland was really important too. Some of the people we got to work with were like Ambrose at Missouri, Billy Childs, Seamus Blake, Julian Lage. Like they would come in with their book of music, and then we would learn it and have to play it within 4 days. Was, I think, an incredible growth time for me. And most of the people in the band were about 10 years older than me. So I was just having to learn a lot really fast and getting to play different kinds of music. Like I had never played music like Ambrose's music.
I was going to say, you're with Ambrose and Julian, those are the names I recognize, but you're also learning basically from people who are at the top of the kind of popular and critical consensus of the jazz world. So
yeah,
that's a real boot camp kind of for you as a composer, I assume.
Yeah, and
how does this music really work?
Yeah. And it was a cool program, is still a cool program, because you didn't get a master's and they weren't there to be your teachers. They were like, they played with you. They bring this music and they're coaching you, they're helping you, but like, yeah, it's kind of like more of an apprenticeship kind of program. And it was all sorts of different things. I mean, yeah, one of our first guests was also Dave Liebman, and we had 2 drummers in the band. So we did the book of like Miles on the Corner, and it was like that was a
Oh,
learn-
that's intense.
it was awesome. It was awesome. But yeah, and then at the same time, I mean, this program, they were paying for us to make a record, so we each had to contribute a song. So time to get to work, you know, writing. And also we got to take lessons as a part of the program. And Guillermo Klein teaches composition there, who's an incredible composer. And so I got to study a little bit with Guillermo, and that really, just being around those type of, you know, music and getting to ask Ambrose, how do you think about writing? Billy Child, how do you think about writing? And then get to study with people like
Guillermo.
and then it's like a snowball effect. It was a lot of information in a year for sure. But
How did they change how you thought about writing?
I think things just became more clear, and with every person you'd learn about different possibilities, and you'd get to not only see, okay, this is what the sheet music looks like for this different possibility, but also you'd get to experience like from the other side. I think, I mean, on top of it, just changed my level of being able to read music, because we just had to read and learn such hard music so fast. But it also made me think about, how do you write music in a way that's the best to communicate it? Because like, I won't say who, but some people have great charts that, like, even if it's really hard, it's really clear. Some people have charts where you're like, no wonder your band doesn't use music. This is impossible to read, you know. And it's a big
Without a Leo Smith. Here's a painting.
yeah, exactly. Everybody does it, and it's not better or worse. It's just different. And then learning, like, how do I want to communicate what I want to come out sonically? Yeah.
You come back, if it's a year long, you come back late fall 2019, and then a couple months later, COVID.
Yeah. Well, and having met my now husband, Jose Luis, in Switzerland, and he's from Brazil, I convinced him to move to New York. And so we were gonna do it. We were gonna go and also meeting.
Live in a closet together.
Yeah, exactly. But meeting him was also an incredibly important part of my musical growth. I mean, just learning about Brazilian music and Brazilian composers. And we just, I mean, before anything else, we were playing music together, like immediately. And we were just like understanding how to improvise together in a way that, has grown to be my biggest musical collaborator. But also, like, I knew quickly, like, oh, we have this telepathy thing that's kind of magic. Yeah, and then one of the drummers in that band, Chase Elodia, he ended up being the drummer in my first band. So I think when I moved to New York, I knew...
The second time?
Yeah, when I moved to New York from Switzerland, I knew that I had a tour booked in Switzerland in November. So I knew when we came back, I was going to make my first record at the jazz campus, because they have like the nicest studio in the world. And I knew that my band was going to be Zay and Chase, because the two of us had started playing, or the three of us with different bass players had started playing a lot towards the last half of the year. And then
Jose plays piano.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then I was thinking about who to get on bass, and nothing made more sense to me than my very close friend and mentor, Doug Weiss. And so, yeah, so me and Jose Luis moved to New York September 2019. I guess I moved a month earlier because he was still getting his visa sorted. I was live-in nanny, trying to find a place for us to live, writing the music that would then be for my first record, And She Spoke, like on the train and like in this little place where I was nannying, and just trying to put it together. It's
Such as the New York way.
yeah, exactly. And then Jose Luis got there, and he was at Queens College. But we kind of started playing, and we started putting this band together. And then we went back to Switzerland in November, did a tour, made my record, came back, and it's so funny. Like, it was so hard, as New York is, but it was like late February, I would say like February 2020, we were finally starting to get it together. We had like a couple weekly gigs, one on a Saturday. We were about to start doing some work for this like events agency to make a little extra money. I had just made my record. I got my band together. Like, we both were starting to play more with other people. And then, March 2020, it just foiled our plans.
What happened?
Yeah,
I mean, sorry. Obviously, COVID happened. I mean,
yeah.
what happened to you two, and how did you start to navigate the pandemic?
It's funny, I remember this Saturday weekly gig we played at Toast right by MSM. I remember we were coming home. We were on the subway at like midnight on a Saturday. And for some reason we were taking the shuttle. What?
In March?
Yeah. We were taking the shuttle from like first week of March. Taking the shuttle from Times Square to Grand Central to go to the east side. And I remember it was empty. And we were like, oh, what's happening? And then we sat inside of an expensive apartment for 6 months, because like, what else do you do? We were just like trying not to die, I guess. And my dad mailed us a small interface that he found in his basement, an interface to record from our computers with, say, his keyboards. And we started recording a little bit and just tried not to lose our minds. But
Were you in New York that whole time?
we were in New York the whole time. We could not leave. We didn't have any way to leave. It was terrible. And we were, at the time, we were living in this weird part of town, like First Avenue and 63rd Street, very close to a lot of the hospitals. And it was scary.
In Midtown?
Yeah, like Midtown, but all the way on the east side. We were next to the FDR. We bought like this little battery thing so that once it was warm outside, we'd go busk in Central Park. But like, that was a battle too. Like, you had to fight to get your spot because then other people would try to play loud over you. And so our 6-month lease was up on that place. And the person we were subletting from was like, do you want to stay? We were like, no way. Queens College for Zay was completely online. We were running out of money. We like had like one window in our apartment. It was rough. So we packed everything up and we moved to my dad's house in Silver Spring, Maryland. And the story starts over, big loop.
What's how do you start setting down professional identity in VC now, kind of after all this?
Yeah, it's funny. When I was a kid, I think there was a time where I hated that everybody was like, you're Andy's daughter. It's like, grr, I'm my own person. But it's like, now I love that because, grow older and you have different relationships. But also, people have started meeting my dad and they go, oh, you're Alex's dad. Ha ha. So, I think that Zay and I we just started playing with anyone and everyone. We'd have sessions outside of my dad's house. We'd, play random gigs here and there. And we just started rebuilding this community. And a lot of it was people that I had known my whole life, but it was so fun. I mean, like Keith Butler was someone that I met when I moved back here. And is, now a great friend and collaborator and
CapitalBop stuff.
and yeah. And yeah, I mean, I put out
Your first record.
my first record in 2021.
Could you talk about what did you want to say with that record?
Yeah, so And She Spoke was a collection of songs that I wrote based off of poetry by women, and then compositions by women. And it was just, I wanted to tell the stories of these women that had come before me in poetry and art, in Black American music, and telling their stories. And a big inspiration for that was my grandmother. My maternal grandmother was a poet and activist and educator in Paraguay. And there's a book of poetry I've had since I was a kid that meant a lot to me. And that was kind of the catalyst for this album. And yeah,
There's a lot of that reflected through the kind of lessons of the Gen shoes and whatnot of what do you want? Like really not, you're just kind of writing to write, but what do you want to communicate to others?
Exactly. And this felt like an easy way. Not an easy way. It felt like, for me, looking back now, I see that this was a clearly defined way for me to do that when I was still learning about, like, who am I, a person,
Clearly defined as easy in its own way, but not easy. And
Yeah.
obviously you're still here. I don't think you've moved back to New York at all. What's it been about, like the kind of last 5 years about?
Oh God, it's been
It seems like at this point
years.
roots are firmly planted back here in DC. Why not leave again?
Yeah. I mean, it's a question Jose Luis and I have had a lot. And I also have to say that he started really understanding the scene before there were jazz gigs. There was this blues gig that he played every week with my dad at a cigar bar in Alexandria for for like a year and a half. And so he got to see all the parts of the DC scene, between me and my dad, and meeting other people. Yeah, I just realized, like, it's just so special and beautiful what this city and what this scene has. And there's so many incredible artists here. And, half my band still lives in New York, and we go there between twice a month and every other month. And I try to stay connected to a lot of my community there, but more and more we stayed here, we were like, this is our city, this is our family, this is our scene, this is like the music we want to be making, this is the space for the music we want to be making. And the rat race is crazy, but just, we have a little bit more space to create. I mean, literal space. We can live in a small house with a basement and record, and
Not closets.
yeah, exactly. And part of it's just like, this is because I was so connected, because my dad was connected, like, this is a place where we could get work, and we just kept having more and more work, and we were like, we can't go back to New York and make less money doing less gigs. Like, we can't afford that. But I think, although that was like the reality check of it, I also think it's true that both of us grew really fond of what this scene and means, and the people, and his band, getting really close with Dana Hawkins and his band really was a big part of that for him. And yeah, now you can't get rid of us.
Circling back 3 hours ago when we first touched on it.
Yeah.
When did you start to appreciate this space that we're in for what it is and for what it means for the scene and what it's allowed for the scene for the last 26 years?
This,
Yes.
yeah. Ooh, I mean, I always knew it was special, right? Like, even when I was a kid or when I was in high school, getting to play here and, with Paul or sit in, it was always packed with people that really cared about the music. And there was such a sense of community. I don't know if I would have had those words, but I always knew it was special. And over the years, I think I just traveling and, I just learned how rare something this special is. And for it to keep being, we played here, a month and a half ago, a couple months
October?
ago. Yeah. Like, wow, it keeps being this special space. And I'm so honored to be able to walk into this space and all of the people are like, how are you? How's your dad? And telling me all these memories of growing up. Yeah, and just to see the same people here for decades, supporting this music in this city, supporting the musicians that make this city special is just really incredible,
When was the first time you played here as a leader?
I actually think that this October was the first time. It was.
I was wondering. I feel like that was the first time Alex Hamburger, Westminster for the CapitalBop calendar. Yeah, it felt like the first time.
Yeah, I had talked to Dick about doing it forever. It's funny. Dick called me and I didn't answer. Then he called my dad. My dad was like, "You better call Dick Smith back."
He's like, how dare you pick up Dick Smith?
I was like, oh my gosh. But we had talked about it, and they used to do something when the Wharf wasn't what it is. They used to have an outdoor concert series. So I did that a couple times in college. Man, I did that once with my dad, Elliot Seppa, Max Light, and Tom Williams. No. Jeff Reed, Max Light, and Tom Williams. And that was fucking epic. But I did a couple of those. But I never this was my first time being a leader. So
how do you prepare for that, knowing kind of, it says on the flyer, home for straight ahead, traditional classical jazz here in DC. How do your music is rooted in that, but it's different.
yeah.
So how do you think about knowing what the kind of historical nature of the space is? How do you prepare for that?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't play any of my original music. It was a great and fun opportunity for me to dig up some of my favorite tunes and some of my favorite arrangements. And I always think it's fun to have wasn't a theme, but to have something different to curate. Yeah, it's like a curatorial experience is how I think I thought about it. I know what the audience here is like. I know, so I can use that to curate something that still feels like me, but also fits the audience,
Why is having a space for that classical jazz dedicated space why is that important for the scene in 2025?
I mean, we have to, as a tax on the people and the history of not only this music, but this country and culture are happening in our city. We have to fight for the history of what this music is and to keep telling the story about what it means to this country, to the city. And I think that a space like this is so important and vital for that. And it's also a space where we really honor our elders,
It's a living history.
Exactly. Yeah. Well said.
How are we?
That's it. Thank you.
Ta-da!
Oh, wow.
That was
We've been
fun.
at it for
That was great.
an hour and a half.